r/NoSleep. I signed a contract with Shadows, and now they've come to collect. When I was 22, desperation drove me to do something reckless. My mother had been battling cancer for months, and her treatments were draining every penny we had. I worked 2 jobs, barely slept, and still, it wasn't enough. I'd do anything to save her. Anything. One night, as I sat in the dim light of her hospital room, holding her frail hand, I whispered a plea into the empty air. Someone, anyone, help me. The room grew unnaturally cold. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting long shadows that stretched and twisted across the walls. A man stepped forward from the darkness. No, not a man. His suit was impeccably tailored, but his face was obscured, a void where features should be. His voice was silk and smoke. I can help you. I should have screamed, should have run, but his presence froze me in place. What do you mean? I croaked. Your mother's life for a price, he said smoothly, holding out a scroll of parchment. The edges writhed like they were alive, and the letters glowed faintly. Sign, and she'll recover. Completely. What's the price? My voice shook, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. A decade of your life, and a favor to be collected later. His grin, though unseen, was palpable. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the pen he offered, a sleek, black quill that seemed to drip ink from its tip, and signed my name. The moment the ink dried, the man disappeared, leaving behind only the faint scent of burnt paper. The very next morning, my mother woke up. Her doctors were baffled, her scans showed no trace of the disease. It was nothing short of a miracle. I should have been ecstatic, but unease crept into my joy. The contract haunted my thoughts. What would the favor be? 10 years passed. My mother lived healthily, blissfully unaware of the bargain I'd made. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be with the memory of that night gnawing at me. And then, on the night of my 32nd birthday, I heard the knock. It wasn't loud, but it reverberated through the walls, shaking the very foundation of my house. I opened the door to find him, the faceless man, his suit as pristine as I remembered. It's time, he said, stepping inside uninvited. For what? I stammered, my stomach twisting. For your favor. He handed me another scroll. This one was blank, but as I touched it, words etched themselves into the parchment. They read. Bring me 3 souls before dawn, or I'll take yours instead. I dropped the scroll, but it hovered in the air, glowing menacingly. You can't be serious, I whispered. Oh, I never joke. His voice dripped with mockery. The rules are simple. The souls must come willingly. Tick-tock. And just like that, he was gone. Panic gripped me. Who could I sacrifice? I couldn't think of anyone I hated enough to condemn. But as the hours ticked by, fear began to warp my morality. It wasn't my life at stake, it was my soul. At midnight, I drove to a bar on the outskirts of town, a place where lost souls gathered. My first target was easy, a man slumped over the counter, drowning in whiskey and self-pity. I bought him a drink, struck up a conversation, and convinced him to come with me for a better opportunity. The second was harder. A young woman sitting alone, her eyes rimmed red from crying. She was hesitant, but desperation laced her voice when she agreed to leave with me. By 3 a.m., I only needed one more. The weight of what I was doing clawed at me, but I couldn't stop. I drove to a homeless encampment, finding an old man huddled by a fire. His hollow eyes met mine, and he nodded before I even spoke, as if he knew. I brought them to an abandoned warehouse, the scroll burning in my hand as I read the instructions aloud. A circle of salt, symbols drawn in chalk, and then their consent. Say you're ready, I urged them, my voice cracking. They exchanged uneasy glances, but one by one, they spoke the words. The air grew heavy, and the shadows around us writhed like living things. The faceless man appeared, clapping slowly. Well done, he said, his tone amused. But you misunderstood. What do you mean? I asked, my chest tightening. They were willing, yes, but not to die. He gestured, and the shadows pounced on them. Their screams pierced the air as they were dragged into the void. I fell to my knees, trembling. You tricked me. You tricked yourself, he said coldly. But don't worry, your debt is paid. For now. He disappeared, leaving me alone in the silent, blood-stained warehouse. I returned home, but life hasn't been the same. Every night, I hear whispers. Every shadow feels alive. And every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of those I condemned. I made a deal to save my mother, but I've damned myself in the process. To anyone reading this, no matter how desperate you are, never sign a contract you don't understand. Some debts are too steep to pay. I thought it was over. I thought the nightmare ended when the faceless man left, but I was wrong. The real torment began after I tried to move on. The first sign was subtle. My reflection started looking wrong, slightly delayed, or smiling when I wasn't. Then there were the shadows. They twisted unnaturally, forming grotesque shapes in the corners of my room. Once, I woke up to find a shadow shaped like a hand on my chest, pressing down so hard I couldn't breathe. When I flipped on the light, it vanished, leaving behind a bruise shaped like long, skeletal fingers. The voices came next. Low, guttural whispers, at first faint but steadily growing louder. They spoke in a language I didn't understand, but I knew the words were meant for me. Sometimes, they would call my name in a sing-song tone, dragging the syllables out like a taunt. Other times, they would laugh, mocking, cruel laughter that echoed long after they stopped. The three souls I delivered to him weren't just gone. They lingered, their faces etched into every shadow, every darkened corner. I'd see the woman crying in the mirror behind me or the old man staring blankly from across the room. Once, I woke up to the drunk man from the bar sitting at the foot of my bed. His head hung at an unnatural angle, his neck bent like it had been snapped. "You did this," he whispered, his voice hoarse and wet with something I didn't want to imagine. "You'll never escape us." I screamed, bolting upright, but he was gone. Then the rules appeared. It started as one note, scrawled in the same glowing script as the contract. It was pinned to my bathroom mirror one morning. Rule 1: Never leave your house after midnight. I laughed nervously, thinking it was some kind of sick prank. But that night, I forgot. My car had broken down, and I had to walk home from a late shift. The streets were eerily quiet, save for the sound of my footsteps. And then I heard it, a second set of footsteps, heavier and slower, trailing just behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding. The footsteps matched my speed, growing louder and closer. I ran the rest of the way home, fumbling with my keys as something invisible breathed down my neck. The moment I slammed the door shut, the footsteps stopped. When I looked outside, the street was empty. The next morning, another note appeared. Rule 2: Always check under your bed before you sleep. This one unnerved me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me as I crouched to peer under the bed that night. At first, I saw nothing. Then, just as I was about to move, I noticed two faint pinpricks of red light, eyes, staring back at me. I leapt back, heart racing, but when I looked again, nothing was there. The rules kept coming, each one more unsettling than the last. Rule 3: Never answer the door after 10 p.m., no matter who knocks. Rule 4: If you hear someone calling your name, don't respond. Rule 5: Never look directly into the shadows. One night, I broke Rule 3. It was 10:15 p.m., and there was a knock at the door. I ignored it at first, but the knocking grew louder and more insistent. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "It's me. I need help. Please open the door." Panic overtook me. I knew she wouldn't just show up unannounced, especially at this hour. But what if something was wrong? I opened the door, and the world seemed to tilt. It wasn't my mother. A figure stood there, tall and grotesque, with elongated limbs and a face that shifted constantly. My mother's, the bartender's, the old man's. Its voice was a distorted chorus of all their voices, overlapping in a horrific symphony. "You broke the rules." It lunged at me, its twisted hands reaching for my throat. I slammed the door and bolted it, but the damage was done. From that night on, the rules weren't just warnings, they were punishments. I saw things no one should ever see. My walls bled a thick, black ooze that reeked of decay. My dreams turned into vivid, inescapable nightmares where I relived every soul I'd condemned. Sometimes, I'd wake up to find myself standing in the middle of the street, the faceless man watching from the shadows. Yesterday, the final note appeared. Rule 6: At midnight, you will face judgment. Be ready. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I couldn't run. Midnight came, and with it, the faceless man. He stood in my living room, flanked by the three souls I had given him. Their eyes were hollow, their expressions empty, but I could feel their rage. "You failed to follow the rules," he said, his voice calm but dripping with malice. "And now, your soul belongs to me." "No," I shouted, tears streaming down my face. "There has to be another way. I'll do anything." The man tilted his head, as if considering my plea. "Anything?" "Yes," I begged. "Just tell me what to do." He smiled, and for the first time, I saw his teeth, sharp, jagged things that gleamed in the dim light. "Very well. Your soul will remain yours. For now. But you will become my servant." I didn't understand at first. Then he explained, I would take his place, collecting souls for the contracts he made. I would enforce the rules, deal out punishments, and ensure that no one escaped. "Refuse," he said, "and I will take not only your soul but also the souls of everyone you love." I had no choice. I agreed. Now, I write this as a warning. If you see a man in a perfect suit, with no face and an offer too good to be true, run. Don't stop, don't look back, and for God's sake, don't sign anything. Because if you do, it'll be me who comes to collect. And trust me, I'm not as forgiving as he was.